Welcome to Alabama Gristmill. Good to have you back, and I appreciate you listening. I want to say a welcome to my co-host, Donna Causey.
Hello. I am glad to be back again today. We have another good story today.
Yes, we do. And definitely, as I always talk about the weather, enjoying the spring weather today. It's not finally going to be summertime, so it's kind of nice.
Right.
Or at least warmer. We're turning on the air conditioner.
Yeah, it has to be on when it starts getting warmer about this time of year. You can't avoid it. But then there's the funny time because of the fact that it's warm during the day and cool at night, so you're going back and forth between heat and cool.
This is true, yeah. It's going to kind of balance it back and forth.
According to the complaints.
Like you said, we got an interesting story today about the Hollywood legendary movie star Mickey Rooney and his connection to the state of Alabama. And,
it's a
I'm
strong
sure
connection.
everybody... Very strong connection. And I'm sure everybody knows about Mickey Rooney and with all his movie career. I mean, he's been over, I guess, 300 movies. And he was in one of my favorites, A Mad, 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 Mad World was another one. And Breakfast at Tiffany's, among many other movies. And
yeah,
he was
like
a
very famous child star. He started out in vaudeville at the age of 6, believe it or not. I mean, that's young. And he was a big child actor, but he was kind of short, so he didn't get as many roles, I don't think, as he got older. But he was the first teenager nominated for an Oscar at the age of 19.
So like you said, it got a strong connection to the state of Alabama. A lot of people may not have known about, but some people might have heard about it during the time because it was definitely a newsworthy event. But before we get into that, we want to kind of always want to thank you to our listeners and especially our patron members. We've been really amazed by the patronage and the support. We're actually getting close to hitting our first reward, our first goal, which is that at 100 patrons, we'll be giving out our ebook.
Yeah, the 100 charter members. That's really great. You're getting close to it right now. I think this morning I looked and there were only about 28 more we needed, and it's been busy.
I just pulled it up, and we're already down to 78. So we only have 22 left to go.
22 left to go. So more have joined since I looked at it. So it's moving along. So we'll be sending out that ebook, as soon as we reach the 100. So if you want to, you better get in there, get in quick, because we'll be one of those 100 if you don't join really today, I guess.
Yeah, so we'd like to give a shout out to some of our patron members that we run across that have joined. One being Nancy O. and Nelson. Really appreciate your membership and support.
And she's an author too, as well. So
yeah, you posted about her book on the website. So it's a great book out there.
So you can find it on Amazon, and you can go if you're a patron. She's talking on there too. She'll tell you where you can buy it directly from her. You might can get some signed copies that way too. So you can converse with her online through the patron program. So
absolutely.
That's one thing that I like about it, that we're able to converse with each other easily. And sometimes we get talking back and forth. So if you're not interested in getting all the messages to your patron, just change your settings a little bit on the email. You can do that easily. Sometimes you get too busy and don't have time to talk, and other times you do. So you can change those back and forth.
Absolutely. So you can always find out how to become a patron and the different reward levels that we have set up and the goals. But you can go to our webpage at alabamapioneers.com and you'll see a big button that says become a patron. Just click on that. It'll take us to the patron page and allow you to become a member of the Alabama Pioneers community. So we really appreciate it.
We get a big Alabama Pioneers community, and we get a lot of good questions and answers. In the time we've already answered 2 or 3 in just the small number we have right now. So
yes, with the queries, it allows you to post queries about maybe your roadblocks or your questions you have that you have in your research in your genealogy and your family. So we had another fun element. We had the identify the pictures and try to figure out these unknown pictures.
Yeah, these were some that were at the archives in the state of Alabama, but somebody immediately, it was a town, they figured out what it was. There's really hard researchers, people with sharp eyes, and
the power
patron family.
The power of the people. Power of our community.
That get a lot of people together.
Solving these puzzles. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That's what's fun. And another patron member was asking about a Mason of Alabama, and he found out he was the Grand Master, and we'd written something about him. So it is more and more. When you get people together, they come up with the solutions to the problems.
So if you like having fun with history, this is a place to do it at. So we're having a good time. But we'll go ahead and get into the story. And tell us how that Mickey Rooney has his connection with Birmingham, or with the state of Alabama.
He was one of, as we said before, he is one of the best paid actors between 1939 and 1941, believe it or not, as a child star. But when, of course, you know what happened around that time as we got into World War II. And he was inducted into the U.S. Army for 21 months to entertain the troops in America and Europe. And that's how the story kind of gets to Alabama, specifically Birmingham. As you know, he married 8 times in his life. I guess that's just the way he was.
It was like Elizabeth Taylor model, getting married multiple times. It's kind of the way you did it.
Well, life as an actor and actress is kind of hard. It's hard to hold a marriage together with that.
No, but I don't know how hard that can be, but, I'm not buying that excuse.
Yeah, I don't know. But it was kind of you heard that a lot with a lot of actors and actresses during that time. Well, the connection to Alabama goes back to him being stationed in 1944 in Alabama. He was stationed at Fort Sivert near Gadsden, Alabama, which is a chemical warfare base. He was invited to come to Birmingham for the opening of National Velvet in 1944, starring Elizabeth Taylor while he was in Alabama. And after a movie party, he met, and some people recall the name, Lily Mae Caldwell. She was a social writer and well known in Alabama at the Birmingham News. The Miss Alabama contest at the time was sponsored by the Birmingham News, the Alabama Theater, and WSGN Radio, that famous radio station for people that can think back in time. And of course, you probably don't remember all these things, but there are people that do in my generation. At the movie party afterwards, he happened to meet Miss Alabama, who at that time was Betty Jane Rase. R-A-S-E is the way you spelled her name. She was just a teenager and a senior at Phillips High School in Birmingham at the time. First, she became Miss Birmingham and then Miss Alabama. And she happened to be the daughter of Ernest and Lena Rase, and they lived at 708 9th Court West. So if anybody lives in that direction, you may remember her. She learned to play the piano at the age of 3, and she could sing really well. And she wound up doing so well that she was the fourth runner-up for Miss America. Well, believe it or not, when he met her, he was just infatuated, of course. She must have been a rare beauty. In 15 minutes, he proposed marriage to her. He had just been divorced from Ava Gardner before he went in the military, and he wasn't divorced long. She accepted, believe it or not. And you got to think about it. Wonder why she accepted. But at the time, most people were marrying quickly because they knew their future husband or wife were going off to war. And sometimes you just didn't see a future unless you just went ahead and got married. So there were a lot of quick marriages during the war years. Mickey Rooney was soon shipped off to Europe. They didn't even have much of a honeymoon. And rumor was that they got married in Las Vegas, but it was not true because, again, Lily Mae Caldwell reported they were married at the home of Major Henry F. Jackson, which is known as at his own home, his private home, is known as the Frank Nelson House also. They were married October the 1st, 1944. The best man was Private Robert Guy, and he was a former member of the Kay Kaiser Orchestra. And it's noted in the article that Mickey Rooney had misplaced the marriage license, so the ceremony had to be postponed for a little bit till he could find it. Betty Jane, earlier in the week before they got married, had been driven to Camp Sivert by Mickey, and that's where they made the wedding plans, just shortly after they met and became engaged in 15 minutes. And on Friday, returning to Birmingham, he met with the parents, and they planned the wedding. Hollywood was not very, very happy about all this. They didn't want him to get married at all. They thought this was just a rash decision, and they didn't want him to get married at all. They had a one-night honeymoon, and Mickey left for Europe. Sounds like short, but that was very common back then. That's probably why they wanted to get married quickly, because he knew he was going to be leaving. And Francis Falkenberg, who was a longtime former manager of the Alabama Theater, he was the one that reported about MGM's reaction. And he said they even wanted to get the marriage annulled. They stayed married, and they had their honeymoon at the Thomas Jefferson Hotel, as far as we know. Stayed married a good while because they had 2 children. Both of them were born in Birmingham. One of them was named Mickey Rooney Jr., and he was born July the 3rd, 1945 in Birmingham, and named Joseph Yule the 3rd at birth. And I guess they changed his name to Mickey Rooney Jr. later. His obstetrician was Dr. James Hayes Williams, if anybody remembers Dr. James Hayes Williams, and his pediatrician was Dr. Hughes Kennedy Jr. Later in life, Mickey Rooney Jr., through his stepfather Baker's influence at Disney, became one of the original Musketeers, along with his brother. So both of those children who were born in Birmingham became Musketeers. He appeared in 3 movies and 3 television programs and was involved in music, and he lived in Hemet, California. And the second child, Timothy, which they called Timmy Hayes Rooney, was born in Birmingham on January 4th, 1947. And unlike Mickey Jr., he looked just exactly like his father. At age 10, sadly, he was stricken with polio and was paralyzed for 2 years. He appeared, but later in life, he did pretty well. He appeared later on Maverick and Surfside, Six, Bewitched, and everybody loves that one. Gidget and Dr. Kildare. And all people in my generation remember all those TV shows. And he was in 3 movies as well. He did voiceover for the Jetsons, and I bet you've seen the Jetsons.
Yes, I have.
He suffered from a skin disease, what was much like his horrible bout with polio, and he passed away September 23rd, 2006 in Hemet, California, on his ranch. Well, sadly, though, I told you Mickey Rooney was married 8 times, so you know he probably got divorced, and he did. They were divorced in June 3rd, 1949, and Betty Jane became a singer and a songwriter and a vocal contractor.
He was only married for roughly around 5 years, right?
Yeah, just long enough to have 2 children, I guess.
2 children and get divorced.
Then he goes on to the next wife. But anyway, that's the way he was, though, I guess. But I guess he didn't have affairs. He married everybody, you know? So that's good. That's one good thing to say about it. Betty Jane became a singer, a songwriter, and a vocal contractor, so she was very talented. And she worked as a backup singer on recordings by Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, and Bobby Darin, the Righteous Brothers, and Sam Cooke, as well as many others. She sang on the radio, and she sang with big bands and did voice work for television and films, and appeared on a lot of television variety shows. Her acting name, or her entertaining name, was B.J. Baker. We've got one of her solo recordings on Alabama Pioneer's website if you want to hear it.
I'll put a little bit in right here, right now, so you can hear a little bit.
Well, I'd be your light. Sing on, baby. In the dark of the night. Sing on, baby. If you're ever alone. Sing on, baby. My heart is your home. Baby, sing on. Oh, darling, darling. Sing on, baby. I love you so. Sing on, baby. Don't send me away. Sing on, baby. Don't make me go.
She married again to Barney Gosell, a legendary guitarist and an influential jazz artist, composer, arranger, session player, and a record producer. He did a lot of things. And for several years, he was voted the world's greatest guitarist in the Playboy Downbeat Esquire pose. But they were divorced in 1980. And back in the 1940s, she sang with big bands on the radio, and in the 1960s, she appeared in those shows that I told you about. Some of the variety shows were Dean Martin and Judy Garland she even appeared with. And she backed up Elvis in his recording of Can't Help Falling in Love. And Lloyd Price and Stagger Lee, if everybody remembers that song. Sam Cooke and You Send Me. Bobby Darin and Dream Lover. And Frank Sinatra in That's Life. everybody knows that song, but she was a backup in that. Jackie Wilson and Baby Workout. And the Rogers Brothers, one of their most favorite songs is You Lost That Lovin' Feeling. And she also was on the Nancy Sinatra's 1969 album.
So she was pretty much on all the major hits at that time.
Right.
And, those are
she was a famous person, and she's right there. She grew up right there in Birmingham, right next door to a lot of people that don't even realize how famous she became. She was well regarded as a backup singer by a lot of people. Not only that, she lent her voice to songs and film versions of the Flower Drum Song and the Story of Babar, the Little Elephant, and Heidi's song. So she was her voice must have been very good too, because she did some acting in that direction, because that's what she basically had to do. She died at 74 in Rancho Mirage, California, of complications from a stroke. And her body was buried at sea. That's kind of an interesting story all about her that a lot of people don't realize, that somebody right down the street from them and on 19th Street wound up being so famous.
And sang on all those songs. I mean, that's some
right.
classic songs.
I never realized that, when I listened to them and all.
I mean, yes, she married Mickey Rooney, but for 5 years, but had a pretty stellar career after that.
Right, she had a good, wonderful career just on her own after they weren't married that long. But she really was an enterprising young woman at the time, I imagine, to do all those things. And she wound up raising her children and going through a couple more marriages. She still did real well in life. And we need to be proud of. There's another Alabama pioneer in the last 200 years that we don't know about.
Pioneer out of Alabama, yes. And also when the Hollywood spotlight shined on Birmingham for a brief 2-3 year period, 5 year period.
Right.
And so
Mickey Rooney must have seen something in her when he had that 15-minute conversation with her. I would like to be the fly on the wall listening to that conversation,
True love at first sight, I would say.
Right. That had to be. I mean, that was quick. And for her she's just a young teenager at Phillips High School, and to immediately respond and say, yes, I'll marry you,
Well, you can imagine
and a week later, she's married.
Getting caught all up in the glamour of it at the time and everything. I'm sure there was a lot of that going on. It was the big star coming into town, and be like something like George Clooney coming into town, and everybody being infatuated and all that. So, or Brad Pitt, somebody along those lines, I imagine.
Right, you're infatuated, but to take that risk and change your whole life like that takes a lot of courage, though. And then when you're divorced at 5 years later with 2 children and still manage to have a great career like that takes a lot of.
That is definitely true.
You think about that. Back then, it was hard being divorced, a divorced woman, and especially a divorced woman with 2 children. Like people remember back in those days, women couldn't do a lot of things. They had to get things, had to sign papers. You had to have a father sign things to get loans and so forth. Our husbands to get loans. You couldn't do things easily back in those days. It was a different world. And I think that's one reason I wanted to bring that story out, because of the fact that the world today is so different for women compared to what went on during those days, even the war years. I think the war years really helped people to see what women could do.
That's true. Just like you said, to be, a divorced woman in that time and era was, it wasn't like it is today. You definitely had to. There was a lot of challenges you face.
Yeah, and if you're single and you're divorced and everything, and you didn't have kids, then it would be you could probably get by pretty good. But here she's got 2 little ones, that she had to raise on her own, and pretty much, because that's what happened back then. Women raised the children. So the world has changed so much today in your generation and my generation. It's amazing. It's just, I can't imagine what it'd be like in the grandchildren's generation.
Oh yes. Well, that was an interesting moment in time in Alabama history there. So,
right.
And we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Again, thank you to all the listeners out there. Like we're still continuing to see more listeners every day and on the podcast, and has really enjoyed it. It's good to see you're liking that out there. And if you've got any stories that you know about Alabama and, something that forgotten history, you submit those in to info@alabamapioneers.com or send us an email at info@alabamapioneers.com.
I wanted to mention one thing, too. We're doing on the website right now. Bicentennial is coming up, like we mentioned before, in December of 2019, Bicentennial for Alabama. And we're trying to recognize a lot of the people in Alabama during those 200 years that made a difference in our state and community, and calling them, and they're notable people that need to be honored. We're putting their biographies on the website with a sign saying they were a notable person. So if you'd like to participate, we're working it through the patron program, so you go to that and you can find out more about how to do it. You can, if you have an ancestor that's notable that you maybe didn't get recognized some way, let us know, and we'll see what we can do to see if he's worthy of being on that list of notable people for the state of Alabama.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for listening. And absolutely. Well, thanks for listening this week. And until next week, we'll see you later on. Have a good week.
Goodbye. Have a good week.